On day 91 of the Nancy Guthrie case, newly disclosed details have shed light on a deeply disturbing truth, one that points directly to the person she trusted most, her own son-in-law. Investigators uncovered alarming evidence within his digital activity and financial history, suggesting a motive far more complex and chilling than initially believed. Authorities have now confirmed that Nancy was abducted from her bed while she slept. This revelation stands in stark contrast to the image her son-in-law projected during the first 90 minutes of questioning. During that time, he appeared composed and concerned, playing the role of a grieving family member. However, his digital footprint told a completely different story. Surveillance from nearby doorbell cameras, combined with activity linked to a burner phone, began tightening the case around him. The first signs of inconsistency emerged when Agent Dante formally issued the Miranda warning. The son-in-law brushed it off casually, treating it as a mere technicality. Without hesitation, he waived his right to legal counsel, displaying a striking level of confidence, as if he believed he could outmaneuver federal investigators and walk away without consequence. That decision, made in less than 3 seconds, would ultimately dismantle the narrative he had carefully constructed. At first, his demeanor was nearly flawless. He claimed ignorance, insisting he had no idea why he was being questioned. He described the situation as absurd and firmly stated he would never harm Nancy, emphasizing that he loved her like a mother. His posture was controlled, hands steady on the table, eye contact unwavering, each response delivered with rehearsed precision. He had clearly anticipated the interrogation, but he had not accounted for Agent Dante. When asked to recount the night Nancy disappeared, his story unfolded smoothly, almost too perfectly. He described a pleasant evening, Nancy visiting for dinner, followed by card games and light-hearted conversation. He noted that she seemed happy and in good spirits. Around 9:45 p.m., he claimed he offered to drive her home due to the darkness. He added specific details to strengthen his credibility: what she wore, what she ate, even recalling how she laughed while sharing a memory about her late husband during dessert. That detail, seemingly harmless, now carries a far more unsettling implication. According to his account, he walked her to the front door and waited until he heard it lock before leaving. He portrayed the evening as ordinary, even warm, Nancy's final hours spent in comfort, surrounded by family, including the very man now sitting across from Agent Dante. For a full hour and a half, he maintained this composed, cooperative persona. He answered every question smoothly, never appearing defensive. Yet beneath that calm surface, mounting digital and physical evidence told a vastly different story, one pointing toward a far darker reality. At one point, he even leaned forward and casually asked investigators about the progress of the case, continuing to act like a concerned relative rather than the central figure in the crime. But this was exactly what Agent Dante wanted. He allowed the son-in-law to repeat his story, encouraging his confidence to grow. Because at that stage, Dante wasn't just collecting information, he was carefully setting a trap. And the son-in-law, unaware, was walking directly into it. Everything he had carefully constructed, every detail, every moment in his timeline, was now on a direct collision course with digital evidence that couldn't be altered or erased. Messages, burner phone activity, surveillance footage, it was all converging. 90 minutes into the interrogation, he leaned back slightly, appearing almost at ease, still convinced he was in control. Across the table, Dante gave a subtle signal to his partner. Without interrupting the moment, the younger agent calmly set a laptop and audio equipment on the table, preparing the next step. Dante's tone changed instantly. The earlier calmness disappeared, replaced by something sharper, more deliberate. This was no longer a conversation, it was a controlled confrontation. He told the suspect to listen closely. The son-in-law tilted his head, a flicker of curiosity crossing his face, unaware of what was about to unfold. Then the audio began to play. His own voice filled the room. It wasn't just any recording, it was a traced call made from a burner phone to his personal number at 2:47 a.m. In it, he discussed Nancy's deteriorating condition and referenced a ransom plan that had clearly gone wrong. There was no mistaking the voice. He spoke with precision about logistics, about the details of her confinement. Information only someone orchestrating the situation could possibly know. And then came the shift no script could prepare for. The color drained from his face. His hands, steady for over an hour, began to shake uncontrollably. Even from several feet away, the tremors were visible. The confidence he had carried into the room collapsed in seconds. His eyes moved rapidly, searching for an escape that simply wasn't there. When the recording stopped, silence filled the space, thick, heavy, and unrelenting. Dante let it linger before breaking it with a single, direct question. "Is that your voice?" The denial came quickly but weakly. "That doesn't sound like me," he said, his voice faltering at the end. The crack in his tone said more than the words themselves. He understood the situation, even if he refused to admit it. But Dante wasn't finished. The recording played again, this time with deliberate pauses inserted at critical points. Each pause isolated statements that revealed coordination and intent. With every segment, the pressure intensified. The son-in-law's breathing grew shallow, uneven. The composure he had maintained unraveled completely. Panic set in. He began reaching for explanations, claiming the conversation was related to business or some unrelated issue involving his cousin Marcus. Dante allowed the excuse to sit just long enough to give it the illusion of plausibility. Then, without warning, the second agent dropped a thick folder onto the table. Inside were printed records, every message exchanged between him and Marcus over the 3 weeks leading up to Nancy's disappearance, including the night it happened. Dante began reading them aloud, slowly and deliberately, sliding each page across the table. The son-in-law was forced to look at his own words, laid out clearly in black and white. There was no ambiguity. The messages outlined timing, instructions to disable the doorbell camera, and identified the back door as the point of entry. One message read, "Thursday night works best. Her routine is predictable." Each line revealed careful planning, nothing impulsive, nothing accidental. Then came another message, one that shifted the atmosphere entirely. It referenced Nancy taking sleeping pills around 10 p.m., suggesting they wait an hour before acting. The implication was unmistakable. His expression changed again, this time not shock, but realization. Every message, every instruction he had sent while coordinating the crime, had been recovered. These were not vague or open-ended conversations. They were specific, calculated, and impossible to explain away. The messages went far beyond casual conversation. They mapped out Nancy's daily habits, the layout of her home, even the timing of her medication. The woman he claimed to care about had been reduced, in his own words, to a calculated target. Every digital trace he thought he had eliminated was now guiding investigators straight back to him. He believed he had covered everything, but modern forensic analysis proved otherwise. Just 3 days before his arrest, he had used a commercial data wiping program on his laptop, specifically targeting his browsing history. He was certain it was gone for good. But FBI digital forensic teams recovered everything, every search, every query, every fragment of activity. Agent Dante began reading from the report in a steady, emotionless tone. For the first time in 4 hours, the younger agent froze, staring at the table as the contents were revealed. The searches were deeply disturbing. They included queries on how to abduct someone without leaving evidence, how to send ransom demands using anonymous Bitcoin transactions, and even how long elderly individuals could survive without necessary medication. It went further. He had researched ways to dispose of a body in remote areas and compared sentencing outcomes between kidnapping and murder. One search, made just 72 hours before Nancy vanished, asked whether accomplices receive lighter sentences if the victim dies while in captivity. This was no longer just about planning an abduction. It showed preparation for the possibility, or even the expectation, that she might not survive. Over a 3-week period, his searches evolved from broad curiosity into precise operational planning. He looked up how to disable doorbell cameras, bypass residential security systems, and recruit accomplices in exchange for cash. All of this was conducted on the same device that also contained searches related to Nancy's medication and home security setup. When he attempted to explain it away as research for a crime novel, Dante immediately shut it down. There were no drafts, no outlines, no notes, nothing to support that claim. By then, the son-in-law tried to invoke his rights, hoping to stop the interrogation, but it was already too late. 3 hours of recorded inconsistencies and false statements had already been captured. The evidence of deception was locked in, and the investigators still had more. Beyond the digital trail, they had visual proof. A neighbor's Ring camera, located about 2 miles from Nancy's home, recorded multiple vehicles passing through the area the night she disappeared. One of those vehicles matched a car associated with Marcus, the same individual referenced repeatedly in the text messages. Additional footage from nearby homes showed a car idling near Nancy's residence at an unusual hour. As this evidence was presented, the son-in-law's hands began to shake again. While he had focused on wiping his digital tracks, he had overlooked something unavoidable. Modern neighborhoods are filled with cameras. Every statement he made during the first 90 minutes unraveled almost instantly. With his digital defenses gone, investigators shifted their attention to the financial trail, moving from how the crime was carried out to why. 3 hours into the interrogation, the focus turned to motive. What emerged was a picture of a man overwhelmed by his own circumstances, someone who convinced himself that destroying the life of an 84-year-old woman, the very person he was supposed to care for, was his only way out. This was not impulsive. It was deliberate. Every step had been planned, and every plan was now exposed through the evidence he thought he had erased. The structure of his lies collapsed completely, leaving no room for escape. It began with his financial situation. His checking account was severely overdrawn, buried deep in negative balance. His credit cards were maxed out, with payments overdue for months. Collection agencies had already begun pursuing him. His mortgage had fallen into default, with foreclosure looming within 2 months. The same house where Nancy had recently sat, laughing over dinner, was on the verge of being taken. In total, his debt exceeded $250,000. His income barely covered basic expenses. He wasn't just struggling, he was financially drowning. Investigators also discovered $30,000 in unexplained cash withdrawals in the 3 weeks leading up to Nancy's disappearance. When questioned, his explanations kept changing. First, he claimed it was for business. Then for home repairs. Eventually, he admitted he couldn't account for it at all. The money had vanished, but it clearly played a role. The financial pressure alone was significant, but it wasn't the full picture. Nancy's will revealed something critical. Her estate, worth several $1,000,000, was set to be divided equally between her 2 daughters. That meant his household stood to inherit roughly $2 million. That amount would have erased his debts entirely. But there was a complication. Nancy had already scheduled a meeting with her attorney to revise the will, changes that would significantly reduce the portion going to his family. Investigators confirmed that he had overheard her discussing those plans during a recent family dinner. The same dinner where she laughed, shared memories of her late husband, and carried photos of her grandchildren. The same night she trusted him to drive her home. At that point, his situation became clear. He wasn't just facing debt, he was watching a financial lifeline disappear. In his mind, Nancy was no longer family. She had become a financial obstacle, a risk to his survival, and time was running out. That combination, desperation and opportunity, created the conditions for a betrayal that no one around them could have anticipated. So the question remains, what kind of punishment truly fits someone who turns on their own family for financial gain? How is justice measured when the harm comes not from a stranger, but from within the circle of trust? As the investigation into Nancy Guthrie's disappearance progressed, it became evident that this case extended far beyond a missing person. It exposed a layered story of betrayal, pressure, and the destructive force of unchecked greed. Over weeks of investigation, and later through hours of detailed interrogation, authorities uncovered the profile of a man whose calm exterior concealed a carefully constructed plan. To those following the case, the revelations were both unsettling and revealing. It served as a stark reminder that the people we trust most can, in rare and disturbing cases, become the source of the greatest harm. The son-in-law, who outwardly appeared stable, was in reality overwhelmed by financial strain. His accounts were heavily overdrawn, his credit cards fully maxed, and his home was nearing foreclosure. To an outside observer, he may have looked like someone managing ordinary financial pressure, but the truth was far more severe. With debts totaling over $250,000, the burden he carried was immense. For many, such pressure would lead to stress or hardship, but in his case, it became the driving force behind a calculated crime. Investigators identified $30,000 in cash withdrawals made in the 3 weeks leading up to Nancy's disappearance, money he could not explain. These transactions were not careless decisions. They pointed to preparation. They reflected intent, suggesting that what followed was not impulsive, but planned, an act that would permanently affect everyone involved. Yet money alone does not capture the full weight of what happened. The deeper shock came from the relationship itself. Nancy was not just a victim. She was a mother, a grandmother, and a central figure in her family. The trust she placed in her son-in-law became the very thing used against her. In a chilling twist, her final hours of freedom were spent in the company of those she loved most. That evening, she laughed at dinner, shared memories, and enjoyed time with her family, unaware of what was being set in motion. Even the detail of her carrying a framed photo of her grandchildren adds a painful contrast, an image of warmth and innocence against the calculated intent sitting across from her. The evidence assembled against him was both extensive and precise. Digital records linked him to burner phones and coordinated communication, proving that this was not spontaneous. It was deliberate. His own messages documented Nancy's routines, her habits, even her medication schedule, reducing her life to a series of exploitable details. Phone recordings, message logs, and search histories revealed someone focused on control, carefully planning each stage of what he believed would be an untraceable crime. He even explored scenarios involving her death, researching legal consequences if she did not survive. This pointed not just to risk, but to a willingness, perhaps even an expectation, of the worst outcome. Inside the interrogation room, the psychological shift was just as telling as the evidence itself. Agent Dante approached the process with precision, allowing the son-in-law to repeat his prepared version of events, building confidence. That sense of control became a trap. When the evidence was finally presented, recordings, messages, recovered searches, the change was immediate. Confidence dissolved into panic. The composed demeanor gave way to visible fear. The role of the concerned family member disappeared, revealing the individual behind the plan. What made this case especially disturbing was the level of preparation. Investigators showed how individual actions, using a burner phone, disabling cameras, coordinating with others, were not isolated decisions, but parts of a larger system. Each move was designed to create distance from the crime, to confuse investigators, and to delay discovery. But despite the effort, the evidence proved stronger. Digital traces, forensic recovery, and surveillance footage combined to form a complete picture, one that could not be undone. And ultimately, the damage extended far beyond the crime itself. This was not only an act against Nancy, but against the foundation of trust that holds families together. The betrayal carried a weight deeper than financial loss or legal consequences. It struck at the core of human relationships. For the Guthrie family, the loss was compounded by the realization that someone they had accepted, trusted, and treated as their own had committed such an act. The sense of safety that once defined their home and family life was replaced by something far heavier. Grief, disbelief, and a lasting sense of betrayal that cannot easily be repaired. Financial pressure may have been the initial trigger, but it was the calculated preparation, the digital evidence, and the clear premeditation that made this crime especially disturbing. The son-in-law's actions were deeply tied to his determination to escape a worsening financial crisis at any cost. Nancy's inheritance was not just money to him, it was a solution, a way out, a chance to erase debt and regain control over a life that felt like it was collapsing. The timing of her planned meeting with an attorney to revise her will highlight how deliberate his actions were. He recognized the narrowing window and acted with urgency, no longer seeing Nancy as a person, but as a means to an end. The turning point in the investigation came with the discovery of digital evidence. Messages revealed detailed planning, references to her routine, weaknesses in her home security, and direct instructions to accomplices. His online searches went far beyond curiosity. They demonstrated intent. Investigators uncovered queries about how to carry out a kidnapping, how to move money anonymously, and even how to handle whether a victim survives or dies. Each recovered search and message reinforced the same conclusion. This was a premeditated act with no room for denial. Every statement he made during questioning, every attempt to maintain a controlled narrative, collapsed under the weight of that evidence. Even minor details, like tracking her medication schedule or noting when she typically took sleeping pills, revealed the depth of calculation. This was not impulsive or emotional. It was a structured plan that accounted for behavior, timing, technology, and the expected investigation that would follow. Modern investigative tools played a decisive role. Digital forensics, surveillance footage, and strategic interrogation ensured that his attempts to conceal the truth failed. His belief that he could erase his tracks became his greatest mistake, and ultimately the reason the case could be solved. The financial motive remains central. Crippling debt, the threat of losing his home, and the impending revision of Nancy's will created intense pressure. The potential inheritance, millions that would pass through his wife and benefit him directly, offered what he saw as a complete solution. In his perspective, however distorted, this was not simply a crime, it was survival. That mindset reveals a dangerous intersection of desperation, opportunity, and moral breakdown. But the impact extended far beyond the act itself. The investigation and trial sent shockwaves through the community, drawing attention to hidden financial struggles, family dynamics, and the warning signs that can precede such crimes. It also reinforced the importance of rapid response in missing person cases, particularly within the critical first 48 hours. For the Guthrie family, legal resolution does not erase what happened. They are left balancing memories of trust and closeness against the reality of calculated betrayal. The emotional toll remains, far beyond any courtroom outcome. This case offers broader lessons. It highlights vulnerability, the risks of ignoring warning signs, and the consequences of unchecked greed. Nancy's story endures not only in legal records, but in public awareness. It shows that crimes like this are rarely isolated. They grow out of personal struggles, calculated decisions, and, at times, profound moral failure. Her final days, spent among people she trusted, remain a powerful and painful reminder. The case also challenges assumptions about what a criminal looks like. The son-in-law did not fit a typical image. He appeared stable, composed, even caring. Yet beneath that surface was a carefully hidden intent. It demonstrates how outward normalcy can conceal something far more dangerous. At the same time, it shows the strength of modern investigation. Through digital tracking, surveillance, and behavioral analysis, authorities were able to uncover the truth, even when it was deliberately hidden. Ultimately, the case forces difficult questions about trust, family, and accountability. It also raises the issue of prevention. Could intervention, financial support, or awareness of warning signs have changed the outcome? Some factors might have been identified earlier, but others, particularly the deliberate intent, highlight the limits of what can be predicted. Nancy's legacy is complex. She represents both the vulnerability that comes with trust and the lasting impact one person's actions can have on an entire family and community. Her story also stands as proof of the persistence and skill of investigators who piece together digital and physical evidence to reveal the truth. In doing so, they ensured accountability. While justice cannot undo what was lost, it establishes responsibility. The human cost, however, remains undeniable. This case exposes the darkest aspects of human behavior. How desperation, combined with opportunity, can lead to devastating consequences. It extends beyond law into questions of ethics, relationships, and choices made under pressure. Nancy Guthrie's story will endure, not only as a warning, but as a call for awareness. It underscores the importance of vigilance and the understanding that even those closest to us may carry hidden intentions. The investigation itself highlights the value of patience, precision, and persistence. Every detail, digital traces, recorded evidence, observed behavior, played a role in uncovering the truth. In the end, the The case reflects both tragedy and resolution. Tragedy in the loss of life and trust. Resolution in the exposure of the crime and the accountability that followed. Her story remains a lasting reminder. Truth, no matter how deeply concealed, has a way of emerging. Evidence endures, and accountability, sooner or later, cannot be avoided. Nancy Guthrie will not be forgotten. Her life, and the circumstances surrounding her death, continue to serve as a powerful lesson about trust, about vigilance, and about the consequences of choices driven by greed and desperation. Even though the case may be closed in a legal sense, its impact continues. It stands as a testament to the relentless pursuit of truth, the power of careful investigation, and the enduring need for empathy and moral clarity in a world where trust can be both a strength and a vulnerability.